Thank you, Phil, for the kind introduction and for inviting me to engage with your modern Stoicism community. It's an honor to be here to explore ancient ideas that speak so profoundly to our time, which is really a time of contrast. Like, on the one hand, we see societies increasingly fragmented, we deepening polarization, eroding trust, declining empathy. And yet, on the other side, there's this growing resurgence of interest in wisdom traditions such as Stoicism and servant leadership. And this shift is the focus of my talk today. Stoic wisdom meets servant leadership virtues for the common good. Now, the data reveals just how profound this shift really is. Like, using Google's Enneagram Viewer, which tracks the use of words in books over time, we see that references to Stoicism and servant leadership have surged in recent decades. And yet, during the same period, empathy among young people has declined by over 40%. Trust between neighbors in the United States has fallen by 23 points since the 1960s. In my view, this contrast between societal fragmentation and crisis and a hunger for timeless wisdom reflects our search for stability and meaning in turbulent times, our search for an antidote to the isolation and the cynicism that define modern life. On my global civility tour and my work with Academy, which is my online learning institute for civic leaders and engaged citizens, I've seen firsthand how these ideas are increasingly resonating with community leaders who are striving to rebuild trust and foster collaboration in communities plagued by division, ill will, governance dysfunction, even abuse and intimidation in the workplace and the public square. And there's a growing understanding that leadership today demands more than technical solutions, that it requires wisdom, requires ethical action grounded in virtues that bind us to the common good. And so it's in this context that the shared wisdom of Stoicism and servant leadership offer more than intellectual ideas, but inspiration and roadmaps for character development, relational healing, and civic renewal. These challenges are not new. Decades ago, Robert Greenleaf, a visionary thinker and former AT&T executive, foresaw many of these issues when he introduced the concept of servant leadership in 1970. Inspired by Hermann Hesse's 1932 short novel Journey to the East, Greenleaf envisioned a radically different approach to leadership, one rooted not in title, authority, or ambition, but in service to others. In his seminal essay, The Servant as Leader, he famously proposed a simple yet profound test of leadership. Do those served grow as people? Do they become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous? And most critically, what is the effect on the least privileged in society? Will they benefit, or at least will they not be further deprived? Just as Stoicism emerged and spread in a world of excess and domination, Greenleaf's vision offered a stark contrast to the self serving leadership models of his time, which instrumentalized and dehumanized people in the name of maximizing profit and the ambitions of those in power. Prominent thinkers in the decades since have expanded on these themes, diagnosing the cultural forces and ideas that have eroded the moral and social fabric of communities. Canadian philosopher Charles Taylor, in his 1991 book, The Malaise of Modernity, warned of the excesses of extreme individualism and the rising culture of narcissism, how it isolates us and erodes moral bonds and the shared purpose necessary for healthy community. In 2000, Harvard professor Robert Putnam chronicled these societal shifts in his landmark book, Bowling Alone: The Collapse and Revival of American Community. His research vividly illustrates how declining civic engagement and social trust have fractured the network that once supported collaboration and belonging. By 2007, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, in To Heal a Fractured World, The Ethics of Responsibility, issued a powerful call to action. He wrote, "We are here to make a difference, a day at a time, an act at a time, for as long as it takes to make the world a place of justice and compassion." Together, these thinkers, among others, spanning decades and disciplines, converge on a central theme: the urgent need to rebuild trust, to foster collaboration, and to restore a sense of shared purpose. Their work echoes the wisdom of Greenleaf's servant leadership model and aligns with Stoicism's emphasis on justice, interconnectedness, and the cultivation of moral character. While Stoicism and servant leadership remain distinct philosophies, they share a foundational commitment to ethical responsibility. Stoicism centers on cultivating virtue, while servant leadership emphasizes serving others, which requires the cultivation of virtue. Justice, a cornerstone of Stoic ethics, directs us to act fairly and honorably in our relationships with others. As Marcus Aurelius, often seen as Plato's ideal philosopher king, wrote, "What is not good for the hive is not good for the bee." This idea of justice as inherently social naturally leads to ethical engagement with the broader community and the world. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, envisioned a cosmopolis, a universal city where all people live as equals under shared moral laws. This cosmopolitan ideal reflects Stoicism's belief in interconnectedness and mutual respect. Similarly, Greenleaf's vision of leadership as stewardship invites us to see ourselves as caretakers of the greater whole, guiding with humility and service. This alignment is beautifully captured in the ancient wisdom of Lao Tzu, who wrote in the Tao Te Ching, "The highest type of ruler is one whose existence the people are barely aware. When his task is accomplished and things have been completed, all the people say, 'We ourselves have achieved it.'" It is precisely this type of leader that inspired Greenleaf, embodied in the main character, Leo, in Hesse's Journey to the East. The story follows a band of travelers on a mythical quest. Each member carries their unique aspirations and burdens as they traverse symbolic landscapes in search of spiritual enlightenment. Among them is Leo, a servant who quietly carries their belongings, prepares meals, and lifts their spirits with song. One day, Leo vanishes, and without him, the group descends into chaos, unable to continue their journey. Later, the narrator discovers the truth that Leo was not merely their servant, but the very leader of the spiritual order that they sought, guiding them through with quiet, steadfast care. This revelation reframes the essence of leadership entirely, and it's reminiscent of Socrates, whose leadership inspires Zeno. At his trial, Socrates famously addressed those who judged him and vanished him, essentially, by casting their vote for his execution. He gave them a solemn warning and said that after my passing, you shall face a retribution far more burdensome than the one you believed you were avoiding by silencing me. You will encounter a multitude of critics who I once held in check, though you may not have noticed. This kind of leadership from behind or from the shadows is the quiet strength of a true public servant. Their impact often unseen until their absence reveals the void they filled. At their core, both philosophies, Stoicism and servant leadership, challenge the prevailing ethos of self-centered ambition. They call leaders to prioritize integrity over influence, justice over expediency, and the common good over personal gain. Greenleaf distilled servant leadership into core characteristics, each embodying principles that are consistent with Stoic thought. Together, these traits serve as a practical guide for leaders and individuals who seek to act with integrity, to inspire trust, and to nurture collective well-being. First is listening. Greenleaf identifies listening as foundational to leadership. Epictetus similarly emphasized the importance of listening. He said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we can speak." Both philosophies remind us that attentiveness fosters understanding and authentic connection. 2, empathy. Effective leadership requires the ability to see through another's eyes. Marcus Aurelius echoed this sentiment when he urged introspection before judgment. He said, "Whenever you are about to find fault with someone, ask yourself, what fault of mine most nearly resembles the one that I am about to criticize?" Empathy cultivates trust and understanding, essential for both servant leaders and Stoics. The third, healing. Greenleaf viewed healing as integral to leadership, a theme mirrored in Stoic teachings. Seneca equated good health with wisdom, writing that only a wise person can truly be said to be a healthy person. Leaders heal by promoting wisdom and well-being in themselves and in those they serve. 4, awareness. Awareness, particularly self-awareness, anchors ethical action. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Servant leaders like Stoics prioritize reflection to align actions with values. 5, persuasion. Rather than relying on authority, Greenleaf advocated for persuasion, principle that resonates with the Stoic preference for reason over force or coercion. True influence arises from moral integrity and rational dialogue. 6, conceptualization. Visionary thinking is vital for navigating complexity. Both servant leadership and Stoicism encourage a focus on broader contexts, and Zeno's cosmopolitanism, envisioning humanity as part of a universal city, exemplifies this expansive perspective. 7, foresight. Greenleaf's emphasis on anticipating consequences aligns with the Stoic practice of premeditatio malorum, preparing for adversity. Both perspectives equip leaders to navigate uncertainty with resilience and composure. 8, stewardship. Stewardship reflects a deep sense of accountability for the collective good. This aligns with the Stoic virtue of justice, as leaders see themselves as caretakers of shared resources and relationships. Marcus Aurelius glowingly described his father and emperor in his Meditations, Antonius Pius, as an excellent steward of resources, highlighting his constant watch on the needs of the empire. 9, commitment to growth. Nurturing the potential of others is a hallmark of servant leadership and Stoic ethics. Both philosophies view the development of human character as essential to flourishing and a duty of care to one another as essential. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that all men are made for one another. Educate them or endure them. And number 10, building community. Greenleaf believed that modern society's emphasis on large institutions had eroded our sense of community, creating isolation and detachment. For Greenleaf, the role of a servant leader was to restore this lost knowledge of community by cultivating relationships built on trust and shared purpose. He argued that leadership is about helping people see themselves as interconnected, empowering them to work together for the collective good. This vision aligns with Stoic thinking, particularly Zeno's ideal of the cosmopolis, where humanity is seen as one interconnected whole living under shared moral laws towards our mutual benefit. So both Stoicism and servant leadership challenge us to transcend ego and ambition, focusing instead on enduring virtues and ethical action such as justice, humility, and service to others. Next, let's explore an ethical foundation that unites these two traditions. That is justice, the virtue that binds individual actions to the greater good and is key to healing fractured relationships, communities, and nations. Justice is the foundation of ethical leadership. One cannot be ethical without being just. It's also one of the 4 cardinal virtues of Stoicism, alongside wisdom, courage, and temperance, or self-control. These virtues work together to guide moral action. Cicero described justice as the crowning glory of the virtues, emphasizing its role in uniting individual morality with societal harmony. For the Stoics, justice was inherently social. Seneca taught, "He who does not prevent a crime when he can encourages it," reminding us that justice demands action. It demands leadership to confront wrongdoing and ensure just relations and just environments. In Robert Greenleaf's vision of servant leadership, justice is achieved by creating equitable environments that prioritize the well-being of others through service. So toxic behaviors, which are inherently unjust, are not tolerated. This requires the associated virtue of courage. Justice calls us to be upstanders in our daily lives. Consider a student who defends a peer being bullied, or coworker who speaks up against unfair treatment in the workplace. These everyday acts of courage remind us that justice is about standing up for fairness and for what is right. It is the moral compass that aligns individual virtue with collective well-being. By committing to justice and integrating it with wisdom, courage, and temperance, leaders inspire trust and foster unity in fractured communities. Leadership begins with mastering oneself. At the heart of self-mastery is the circle of control, a Stoic principle distinguishing what we can control, our thoughts, actions, and attitudes, from what we cannot, such as external events or others' opinions. Epictetus observed it's not events that disturb people, but their judgments about them. Robert Greenleaf's servant leadership mirrors this wisdom. By understanding what lies within their control, servant leaders establish responsibility and clarity in their duty of care. This enables them to prioritize others' needs intentionally and calmly, fostering trust, respect, and collaboration. But self-mastery also demands humility, the ability to acknowledge limitations, seek truth, and to learn from others. Marcus Aurelius embodied this balance, stating that if someone shows me I'm wrong, I will change, for I seek the truth. Through self-mastery and humility, leaders transform not only themselves, but their teams and communities. By focusing on their circle of control and leading with purpose, they inspire those around them to act with integrity, fostering resilience and collective growth. Central to Stoicism and servant leadership is the recognition of interconnectedness, the idea that individual flourishing is inseparable from the well-being of community. The Stoic concept of sympatheia emphasizes the deep bonds that unite all beings, governed by a universal order, or logos. This belief calls individuals to live in harmony with others, understanding that justice and mutual care sustain not just relationships, but society itself. Zeno's vision of the cosmopolis, a universal city where we all live as equals, bound by shared moral laws, is mirrored in Greenleaf's call for leadership, grounded in service to the common good. Both traditions reject self-centered ambition, instead urging individuals and leaders alike to see themselves as stewards of a greater whole. Socrates' city-soul analogy illustrates this well. Like, just as the harmony of a city depends on the virtue of its citizens, the health of a community reflects the integrity and fairness of everyone within it. The city is what it is because the people are what they are. A just leader models integrity and fairness, fostering trust that ripples outward, strengthening the civic fabric. Similarly, a lack of virtue in leaders or citizens disrupts this harmony, creating division and distrust. By embracing the interconnectedness and seeing themselves as stewards of the common good, individuals and leaders can create the conditions for unity, justice, good governance, and collective flourishing. The Stoic principle of oikeiosis captures the idea of expanding our care outward from self-interest to encompass family, community, and all of humanity. Heracles, a 2nd century Stoic philosopher, illustrated this through concentric circles, the self at the center radiating outward to include loved ones, neighbors, and eventually the entire world. This framework teaches that personal growth and societal responsibility are interconnected. Leadership rooted in this principle begins with self-awareness and accountability, gradually extending care to others. Stoics teach that individual virtue strengthens the collective. Leaders who expand their circles of responsibility embody this ethos by recognizing their influence on those around them and acting to uplift others. Robert Greenleaf's servant leadership echoes this call to broaden one's perspective. He argued that true leadership lies in serving others, especially the marginalized, and fostering environments of equity and collaboration. He saw this commitment as essential for restoring trust and rebuilding fractured communities. Leaders guided by this principle act as stewards, weaving together the well being of individuals and the larger collective. Expanding our circles of care demands both empathy and action, whether mentoring a colleague or advocating for a community initiative or supporting even global causes. Leaders demonstrate their interconnectedness through tangible acts of service. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, man's joy is to do man's proper work, and work proper to man is benevolence to his own kind. By extending our sense of responsibility, we strengthen the bonds that hold humanity together, transforming personal virtue into collective flourishing. Justice, self mastery, interconnectedness, and the ever expanding circles of responsibility are not isolated virtues. They form a cohesive framework for ethical leadership. Together, Stoicism and servant leadership challenge us to transcend ego, ambition, and fear, directing our efforts toward the service of others and the common good. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that what we do now echoes in eternity. Every just decision we make, every act of humility we embody, and every gesture of care we extend leaves a ripple in the moral fabric of our communities. These actions, however small, accumulate into a legacy that far outlives us. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. so profoundly asked, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? This question is not rhetorical. It is a challenge. It's a call to lead with courage, integrity, and empathy, shaping a world grounded in fairness and compassion. True leadership is not measured by titles or accolades, but by the content of our character, the lives we touch, and the cultures and environments we shape for the better. By embodying the principles of Stoicism and servant leadership, we can inspire and transform leadership from a pursuit of power into a force for healing and renewal. Through virtue and service, we can all be part of this moral legacy. Thank you.